Welcome, everyone, to the Black Prospector Show. We got a treat for y'all today. I had to do a show. It's Black Health History Month. I know y'all know it is Black History Month, but we're going to talk Black health, specifically health for Black men. A lot of stuff is out there for sisters. This program ain't for sisters. You can listen if you want to, and you probably should for your dad, for your brothers, the whole nine. But we're talking specifically to the brothers today. And I wanted to expand this even more. I've done a couple of videos on just the health of Black men. And real quick, before I introduce my guest, I just want to go ahead and pop this on the screen on why we're having this discussion. All right. So I wanted to go ahead and I've been talking this month about some of the top 10 reasons. This is according to the CDC. For really non-Hispanic Black males. And again, of course, as always, we're not going to get into the non-Hispanic when they want to play that ethnicity game and so-called race. But I do think it at least gives us kind of a foundation for where we're going to go today. We start looking at some of the top 10 causes of death for Black men of all ages. Heart disease is number one, cancer two, Alzheimer's disease. You see the list there. We get to number 5 with homicide, and that's going to be a factor in a moment. And then we have diabetes, we get kidney disease, we get hypertension. And I call those out. I'm going to specifically call out hypertension, diabetes, or as I always say, compliments to my brother, white people get diabetes, Black people get sugar. And so, we talk about these things like it's no big thing. And then we get to stroke, cancer, and heart disease. 5 of those things are something that we actually have some control over. There were rappers, I'm wearing my Fat Boy shirt, people that we nodded our heads to, we bounced to, rappers that are my age. And while I'm old, I don't think I'm that old, but they thought they were going to get much older. They thought they were going to still be bouncing and doing concerts. They throw your hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care, well into their 40s, 50s, and even 60s. But they're gone. And I did not want to have that discussion today without 2 experts. Now, y'all seen them on the show before. We've talked about a lot of different topics, but it's been a minute. But if I'm going to be talking music, I got to talk to Denver and to Mark. What up, fellas? Welcome to the show today.
What's going on? Thanks for having us.
Hey, what's up? It's good to be back.
Well, obviously, we could not have a discussion. And I think the last time we talked about music, we kind of talked about some of our favorite groups and we touched on the funk, the whole nine. And Mark, you always the man on that. Mm-hmm. But with the passing of Dave from De La Soul, we had to bring Denver in because he is, as he's sporting his De La Soul shirt now, he is the residential De La Soul expert, and probably even beyond just the resident, probably anywhere, he's the De La Soul expert. But it's sad because here we have another contemporary of ours that's gone. So, brother, give me, why should the younger people, and I think of, my kids, 33, 23, and when I start going, the dude from De La Soul is dead, why should they care?
Well, first thing is, thanks for having us again. And I will say it simply this way. De La Soul is pivotal to hip hop, mostly because at that time there was a rise in what they refer to as gangster rap. And a lot of times they are kind of pitted as this group that was the antithesis to gangster rap. A little known fact, they actually were a fan of a lot of those hip hop groups. It's just like with me and you, I listened to the Eazy-E's, the NWAs, and that kind of thing, even the 2 Live Crew to some extent. But they were not talking about things that I could absolutely relate to. De La Soul, for me, was that first group that they talked and they looked like me. When I say they looked like me, they kind of had that style of dress that was a little bit more on the preppier side that I was on. And so that alone is, they came in with a style of music. They were heavily into sampling, which we know can be controversial at times, and did almost cost them dearly early on. And we'll talk about that a little bit probably as this progresses, but it is the difference in that like opposite direction that they took that inspires so many hip hop artists today. And I'll go into that a little bit later if we have time, but I'll talk to you about some of the rappers that I know that they influenced and that are, grieving just like I am about this tragic loss.
Mark, anything you want to add on what did De La Soul kind of mean to you? Why, you telling your kids, why should they care about De La Soul?
You know what? I have to be honest. When I really started getting off into hip hop, I mean, everybody has their moment when, you connect with hip hop. I think we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I mean, for me, it was The Message with Grandmaster Flash and Furious Five. That's the first rap song that made me pull out a sheet of paper and a pencil, push the rewind button back and forth so I could write down what they were saying. But when De La Soul came around, it was just like, what is this? Obviously their first big hit, they sampled Knee Deep. So that really struck me because they were bringing a genre that I really loved as a child, and they were bringing it to another generation. So I was trying to get into the East Coast thing at the time, but what I really appreciated about these brothers is that, as he said, around the time of gangster rap, there's this certain image that you're supposed to have of a black male. And this is what I appreciated about what was coming out of the East Coast. It was showing like we have some very deep thinkers in hip hop. And this is what I appreciate about all of them brothers that was coming out of the East, because they were spreading some education. If you listen to a lot of the stuff that they were talking about, this is not the stuff you was going to hear from Eazy-E or Ice-T or any of those people. And it breaks the mold. It says, look, black men can represent this way too. We don't dress like that. This is our style. Come roll with us. So we need that diversity in hip hop. We need diversity as black men. That's what they represented to me.
Wow. All right, man. I got to chime in on that one, because to me, that is the thing as well. I remember my boy Kurt was always bouncing to De La Soul, and it was like that sound, although I was already, familiar a little bit with the Jungle Brothers, and then of course the Tribe Called Quest a bit. And it was almost like, I can't remember. And Dwayne, you could probably break it down on who came out first, because it all, especially being in Detroit, it's hard to tell because they could have been out.
For sure.
We might not have just been here at 98 WKLB.
Exactly.
And so, but when you look at that, it's like, Mark, like you said, the so-called gangster rap really wasn't out yet, but yet they were kind of taking this whole conscious thing to another level, because they wasn't as hard hitting as KRS-One, but and then they had Daisies, Flowers. Yeah. It was like, what do you put them in? And so, Dwayne, what was up with that? Especially when they first made that first album, they had all the daisies, the pink.
Yep. So they're doing the neon and everything else like that. So let's take a few different pieces. So what I'll start with, I'm going to talk about how I ever came to know De La Soul. I'll make this quickly. So I have a buddy, Emerson. We're still good friends to this day. We were juniors in high school, or actually this was start of our senior year. His sister was out in New York. She went to school at Pratt. And what he would do is listen to Red Alert show on Saturday night. He'd record them, and then he'd bring them back to us. So I had one, I was listening to it, and this drop comes in. Yo, Pasendale, stand clear to be plugged into lines 1 and 2 so we can flaunt that new style of speed. I said, what? So you kind of hear his plug tuning going back and forth, whatever. So at that time, you couldn't Google it, right? This is like the thing we always talk about. You couldn't just go Google the lyrics. So I used to kind of spend time in the record stores here and there. At that point, I was driving. I could do some different things. So I'd look through all kinds of compilation albums. And so finally, I found the song. It was on some type of compilation album. I was at Fairlane Mall. At the time, my cousin Will, the guy across the street from him worked at a record store in the mall at Northland. So I started going every week. Hey, do you have this De La Soul? I'm reading about them. When is the album coming out? When is the album? I'm talking about it everywhere I'm going. So Young TV Raps during that Christmas time, they come on. There's an episode, and De La Soul is on there, and they're doing Potholes in My Lawn. So during that Christmas break, people are saying, Denver, that group that you've been talking about, they have this video. Now, we didn't have cable at our house. So somebody at recording is like, here, you got to check this video. It's like nothing you've ever seen. So from between Christmas and March of '89, I'm going into the record store every Tuesday. Do you have that De La Soul? Do you have that De La Soul? Finally, one day he calls me, Dave. His name happened to be Dave. He says, hey, man, he said, I got this De La Soul finally that you've been asking me about. So I come in, listen to the whole thing, and my mind is just like blown. Like I've never heard anything like this before. So I go back to my boys at school, and everybody's, let me borrow that tape. Let me borrow that tape. So by the time our senior year is over, everybody's like De La Denver and De La this and De La, because it was just, I was so like super fan of it. The daisies were symbolism. It was an acronym, as you may know, the inner sound, y'all. So getting back to what Mark was saying about the consciousness, they were like this conscious hip hop. They were wearing the medallions, and when I talk about the African medallions and bringing this Afrocentric element into it, and even like you alluded to, we had the Karis ones. Karis One had come out. He was doing his thing. He was teaching us about dudes like Malcolm X and all these other things. But I can always talk to it about how I heard them. I didn't hear the Jungle Brothers. I wasn't really into them until much like later in that year, because what they were doing is they were doing posse cuts in that native tongue. So it was in that grouping, it's De La Soul, Jungle Brothers, Tribe Called Quest. Q-Tip is like the master architect of a lot of that. So what happens is, if you look at it by the way some of the albums dropped, you would think that A Tribe Called Quest was late on the scene, but they were like kind of earlier. So there's a song, Black is Black, on the native tongue, on one of the Jungle Brothers, is one of the first times you get a chance to hear Q-Tip. And so there is just that, they did networking, is what we would call it almost, is right. Each of them had a feature, and is doing our own thing, is one of the Jungle Brothers ones that was at Posse Cut. The other group, so there's the women in the group, if you will, native tongue, includes Queen Latifah and Moni Love. And then the other group that's part of that is Black Sheep. And Black Sheep were the first ones of that grouping that made an album that didn't do a true posse cut. So I'm going to pause there. I've said a lot. I'm going to pause there and go for, and let you ask your follow up, or let Mark talk a little bit.
All I'm gonna do is do the usual shameless YouTube thing, because after all of that heat, y'all need to like and subscribe.
For sure.
That was good. That was good stuff right there. If you got something out of that, like the video down below. Mark, go ahead and jump on in there.
You know what? I like what he just brought, because he's opening up just how these posses come about and what different flavors that they bring about, and they all still fit in this whole big sound, right? And so, to tell you the truth, even though I knew about De La Soul, the group that really started getting me interested more in East Coast hip hop was Tribe, because I remember I was working at this store that shall remain nameless at the time. And there was this brother from New York, and he was just completely on Tribe, and he was introducing me to these tracks. And I now know that Q-Tip was responsible for those. They brought some heat. They introduced me to this whole world of jazz. I knew a little bit about that jazz at the time, but it wasn't until the mid 90s when I really took a deep dive into understanding what jazz was all about, because I was accustomed, when hip hop first came out, it was more funk flavored. And so then when Q-Tip comes along and he starts putting these jazz fusion type elements into this light jazz, straight up bebop, I was like, man, what is this? This is when I really had to start digging into the crates, because I wanted to know what Q-Tip was using. I can honestly say I appreciated this element that he brought, because who would have ever thought of using jazz to rap over? I was accustomed to the funk. And so there used to be this guy that I used to know at this store that shall remain nameless, and we would argue about this all the time, because I like this thing where you had on the East Coast. I'm going a little bit further. I'm gonna cut this in a minute, but you have brothers bringing the funk from the East Coast, but then on the West Coast, a couple of years later, you bring in a group like the Far Side, and they're bringing the East Coast flavor on the West Coast. That blew my mind, because them brothers broke the stereotype. Like, every black man is walking down the street holding his, what he got, they getting into the saggy pant type thing, and they came with that whole different vibe again. And again, then you bring in people like Jay Dilla. Man, my mind was blown, because it opened up, because there were still people at that time, if you remember, who said this is not real music. And I'm like, how can you say this is not real music when they're using real music to sample? They were giving me a straight education that I wasn't even ready for at the time. By the time 95, 96 rolled around, that's when I was ready to really deep dive into jazz to appreciate what this music was all about.
Man, that was hot. That was hot. I mean, because I didn't do a mind map. I almost feel like I need to have, maybe you know how they do on the Zoom calls or whatever at work, where we start doing a diagram. We could almost mind map of the group and the people that y'all just talked about. We're going to look at a list of the rappers that are not here. But when you talked about that jazz, immediately I'm thinking, let's relate that to New York. That makes me think of Guru, gone.
Oh, man.
You know, and so with somebody else you mentioned, and it was like, they're gone. And so it's like, that leads us to, and before we move on, I want to go touch back on Dave from De La Soul. Dwayne, do you know anything about the cause of death? I mean, I saw some things on Instagram, but I wasn't sure what was
drop it. I don't know.
So
Please,
they have not officially given a reason. However, I want to say it was sometime during the pandemic. It had been identified that he had congestive heart failure. So that one was kind of interesting to me for a couple reasons. One, as you said, it is prolific in the Black community. I have a buddy, James, who went to presentation with us. I don't know if you remember him, Dev, but James was in the same grade as I was in. He was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, bad shape. He went on a health kick. He's completely turned it around. He's finished up his undergrad, has become an ambassador for the American Heart Association, was featured in Ebony, did an article in the AARP about heart health. So I had hoped, like, yeah, I know somebody who has taken this, understood it, and turned around. But to your point, what it appeared to be, and everybody knew that it was there was some diagnosis and some battle of congestive heart failure, and there was not. I don't know, like, so kind of tying this together on the we just talked about A Tribe Called Quest with Fife. His, some of his things were, his health issues had been identified earlier on, so we kind of watched that, and even it was very well documented in the Beats, Rhymes, and Life movie of the challenges that he had. And I'll never forget that part in the movie that just like hit me in the gut punch is when, Q-Tip is kind of saying, hey, like, you wanted to do this, get on it. I'm like, dude, your man is sick. Lighten up a little bit. But that's that intensity that is Q-Tip, right? The genius. But so yeah, we the health issues were very well documented. I mean, the lyrics go, "When's the last time you heard a funky diabetic?" So it was right there in front of you, and we knew about it. So,
and what's really unique when you mentioned Fife, and like you said, him saying, "When's the last time you knew a funky diabetic?" We all have family members that are diabetic, but we never like consider that to be a cause of death. We don't consider that a reason why someone passes away. And, especially when we were younger, it's like, okay, somebody the first time you get queasy when you realize, oh, you got to give yourself a shot in your stomach. You go through that. And then, you learn like, well, it started with a little pill. And then, as we got older, in the case of my grandfather, then he ends up having his leg removed. And so then it's like we had to be older to learn some of the ramifications of that lifestyle, and of course we're not talking about folks who get it or have diabetes as children. We're talking about adult onset diabetes. We're talking about the diabetes that you may get where you really don't think about it because you're younger, but we tend to eat whatever we want to eat because we never think that spiking our blood sugar levels to the extreme, meal after meal after meal for years at a time, is ever going to have any kind of ramification because we're going to live forever. And that's what brings us back to a lot of these hip hop artists. It almost makes me wonder if hip hop would have been a more mature genre, what would cats have been rapping about even back then? because
Right. So
we
I'll
grew up
stop
with
you
hip
right
hop.
there.
Go ahead, bring it.
Because there is that one song off of the first Tribe album. And Mark, if you were listening to that first Tribe album,
Mm.
there was Ham and Eggs, and that
Ooh,
song was
yes,
I don't eat it because they're high in cholesterol, right? And
cholesterol.
so
That's right.
there's a whole thing just even in there. They were bringing some consciousness that,
Yep.
to your point, it was starting to be there. But the other thing that I don't know this personally, but we know that that lifestyle that they had to live to be on the road, these
Mm.
guys were not making good money. And so
Mhm.
what they tell you all the time is like most of their money came from touring. So when you're
Mm.
touring and you're doing all these different things, you're usually not taking care of your body. You're eating whatever you can get your hands on. And some of that is
Mhm.
adding to it. But it's not like we didn't have those seeds planted. It's just more of how much of it did we really let sink in. And so I'll pause it right there for you and let you deal with that one for a second.
No, see, that's good because I'm glad you brought that one up because I had totally forgotten all about that song. Yep. I considered healthy eating as part of the Nation of Islam.
Correct.
That was
exactly. Yep.
So
exactly.
When was it Lord Jamar said, "Get off the swine and get refined."
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
blind and you lost your blank mind.
Exactly.
It was the Nation of Islam thing of eating pork. But I never associated healthy eating with anyone else. So that is a perfect example. Go ahead, Mark.
You know what? Another element I want to bring into this. Intriguing that you would have this T-shirt on, and we're talking about healthy eating, and you got on a Fat Boys T-shirt, right?
Because that was my favorite group, and 2 of the 3 members are gone.
Open up the fridge. What did I see? The back of the the back of the
fridge.
Back at me,
right? I thought to myself, I could almost die in an image of here, a pizza pie.
Pizza pie.
So what I want to do with that is think about this for a minute. Again, this image that we have of this Black hyper masculinity. Okay. Mm. We're not supposed to care about that stuff. That stuff does not affect us. We're supposed to be the men with the S on our chest. So how can you bring this to hip hop in a genre where you're not allowed to express your shortcomings? You're not allowed to express your vulnerability. That's not something that you can do. One of the hip hop albums that really struck me, and we've talked about this album over the years. Not only, like I said, to me, the second Far Side album was the one that really got me into them.
Yep.
But then I go into a group like Lil Brother, and man, their album, The Minstrel Show, dog, the personal touch that they brought to that about their lifestyles, about missing their fathers, why they didn't have a father. I mean, it was just stuff that was just thought provoking. Like Black men are not supposed to be able to present that on a record. So this is what I'm saying. You make that dichotomy between, okay, you got 50 Cent on this side, and he's giving the world that exact stereotype that the world wants of Black males.
Yep.
Then you got the other side of people, groups, again, like Lil Brother or the Far Side, and they're expressing this like all Black men are not like this. Who's going to sell more records? And that's still sitting with us to this day, because you want to get into the music industry, you want to sell records. So you want to be more like 50 Cent rather than the Far Side. How much is this lack of being able to have a certain type of vulnerability to express this other side of life that we're not allowed to do? If we were allowed to express that, how is it possible that some of these brothers might still be around? Because it's being an open discussion, because now it's in hip hop. It's something that just never really happened.
Well, Dwayne, let me ask you about.
Oh yeah. No, go ahead. I'll hold my thought. I want to hear your question first. I'm much better at answering the question. So,
well, I was going to bring that because to me that brings me back to De La Soul. Because to me, De La Soul probably, I wouldn't even say more than the Tribe, because we at least knew what the Tribe had beef with PM Dawn, something like that.
Exactly.
And at least you had Fife brought that hood element to the Tribe. De La Soul seemed to be straight up. They were short of what we would probably consider PM Dawn being straight up milquetoast, but but De La Soul truly talked about things that nobody else was really rapping about.
Yeah. So let me take that one, because there's a nice bridge and segue into that. So coincidentally, and this has been kind of the tragedy within this part of it, that second album, De La Soul is Dead. So you kind of have this like juxtaposition of like one of the members is dead, and that album was like in its own right was a breakout album. But the particular track on that stands out is Millie Pulled a Pistol on Santa Claus. Now the title, and they even talk about this, is sounds crazy, but what that is, if you don't know that song, it's actually about incest and sexual molestation, and it is a very like thought provoking song. And one of the things they did, and if Mark, you don't know this, when you would like it, they dig in heavy into the like Parliament George Clinton. I know because of different I forget which points he's going by George Clinton and when their Parliament, and I know some of that is because of like different legal battles and things of that nature. But the song starts off with if you suck my soul, I'll lick your funky emotions, which is the beginning off of
that's Funkadelic.
Off the Funkadelic.
Uh-huh.
I have that one on vinyl, and then the main part of it is the song "I'll Stay," which is just, and why I bring that up is like you said, there was the funk, but then there was like in hip hop, because of the competitive nature, you always want to one up. So when De La came out with Me, Myself, and I, and they're using Knee Deep, like everybody and their mother knew that Parliament song. But then when you start pulling out things like I'll Stay, like you have to be like, your parents have to be knee deep into something before you knew that. And like you, I started getting into the samples, but it wasn't until way into my adulthood that I kind of figured out like the best way to kind of like find these samples, to like know where they were, where to listen. If you happen to be lucky enough to live like near college radio stations, sometimes they might have one feature a week or something where somebody might really dig into the crates, if you will. But the lyrics on that are like, it was a dark song. And the whole point of that, De La Soul is Dead, is if you look at the image of the album cover, there's got the overturned plant, was this idea of like, we're not hippies. That's a label that's been bestowed upon us. And we can go with the best of them lyrically. And there's even some songs in there where they kind of talk about, having a fight and some things like that. Every once in a while, they would put a song on an album and it would be like, yeah, basically people think that we can't fight, but we will go to blows if it comes to that. And so it's a very interesting way. But again, it's because at that time in hip hop, they knew that if they kept with this, they had that foresight, in my opinion. If they kept with this like kind of peaceful, hippie vibe, they were going to get written off, like you said, like a PM Dawn. They did do an unsung or something like that I saw in PM Dawn. So I don't want to disrespect them completely. Right. But they did not have the staying power to do what De La Soul did. And it is because they were very much visionaries. They understood things in a way that like, it's unfortunate that some of the timing of some of this, and we'll keep talking about that. I don't want to hog the mic here, but it is a very interesting thing that Mark is talking about, is that machismo, like that is in part why a lot of people just didn't mess with De La Soul, because they saw them as being, too weak, basically.
You know what? Okay, this is not necessarily something that you brought up there that I really appreciate, because I'm also a crate digger. But when hip hop started moving off into a whole heavy sampling of Parliament Funkadelic, I knew the hits, right? I knew the Flashlight, Aqua Boogie, Knee Deep, One Nation, all of those. But my parents were not heavy Parliament Funkadelic fans. But I'm gonna honestly say that hip hop is what brought me to have to go and buy the entire catalog of Parliament Funkadelic, right?
Right.
I have a friend that lives in Detroit, and he was a hardcore P-Funk fan. So every time a rapper would sample a song that wasn't one of P-Funk's hits, he was like, man, that's such and such. And I'm like, I didn't know that. I'm like, man, I'm going to have to invest some money in all of the P-Funk stuff. And so when they started sampling stuff like I'll Stay, that did open up my mind, because it showed me the depths of the music of Parliament Funkadelic beyond the hits. A lot of people don't remember, but Funkadelic made a strong transition into more of a popular group, because their first, the albums they had on the Detroit-based Westbound record label, they were not a big selling act at that point until George Clinton decided that he's going to take them in more into commercial vision, because at that time they were doing funk rock. But that's another thing I wanted to bring up, because that's what I really appreciate about hip hop. They gave you a music education if you were willing to listen.
So you know that Potholes is a very rare funkadelic song. And I forget, like I was saying to you, you probably understand this better. There are times when he bounces between Parliament, the parliaments, like there's a whole evolution, and there's a way that at times it has something to do with like label issues. But there's a song called Little Old Country Boy. That is the song that is the sample for Potholes. And it is it's off an album. It's a Parliament album, and it's one of the very early ones, and I can't think of the name of it, but it is like, again, the fact that Prince Paul, through his parents or whoever, had this particular album that most people don't know about and found that sample is just is crazy to me.
For the sake of time, I want to jump on to something while we kind of touched on it. And Mark, you kind of took us there unintentionally. So this is perfect because I liked how you opened the doorway to where I was going to go. When we look at that top 10 causes of death for Black men, homicide, I think, was number 5. And I pulled down a list and it's a crowdsourced list from rapfandom.com. So we give credit where credit is due. So not everyone, it looks like people can kind of just put in whatever text they want to for the causes of death. So I'm not going to vouch for the accuracy of everything on there, but just to kind of give us a list to work off of. The first thing that jumped out at me when I looked at this list of all the rappers that people had added on here that we've lost, it looks like approximately, off the top of my head, I'll say 2/3 of them are gone due to some form of violence. So when you think about hip hop, and you think about, like you said, on really on kind of this box that hip hop folks are in, of not being able to do like a De La Soul. And, this is why for my kids, they always wonder, well, why are you just so kind of smitten with this 1995 and back hip hop? Is because we were able to, like, Farside could be honest and say, my pappy never told me how to knock a nigga out. That's something that what rapper going to admit that you didn't learn how to fight, and you couldn't say that later on. And so when we look at how many rappers we've lost, let's kind of put a pin in it from the health. Let's just take a quick look at how many we've lost just due to straight up violence. And when here it is, we're getting older, we're in our 50s now. And I remember that the first hip hop dude I remember hearing about being gone was, for me, DJ Scott the Rock.
Yes.
Because by then, BDP had really started blowing up, and KRS-One, almost every single song says something about DJ Scott LaRock. Now, me not being from the East Coast, I didn't really know. All I knew is that, okay, this dude is gone. And yet that was like the first name that I recall really hearing about a rapper, a contemporary of ours that died of violent street death, but that wasn't anything new. What say you?
Scott LaRock for me too. I mean, it was just, hip hop was such a fun music. You just didn't, as violent as it could be at times, you just never really thought about that. And, I wasn't a huge BDP fan, but, I appreciated what KRS-One brought. And when that happened, it left me kind of speechless, because it's just nothing we weren't accustomed to. Like, damn, somebody in the hip hop game is dead. Like, how did that happen? So I would say that was the first person that struck me too. And then when you heard all of the tributes coming out, so many people shouting out his name on albums.
Yeah, that was definitely the first one for me as well. And it was kind of a weird, I'm going to say, juxtaposition here, because one of the first rappers that I just kind of loved was MC Shan, and it was the Bridge. And so again, like Dev said, you're in Detroit, and this is why I get upset when people say like you can't get good music or whatever else. It's like you never could listen to good music on the radio. Chances are when you heard these things, they came from your boy whose boy had given them something from some tape of somewhere else, right? So you hear this song, I hear a song, The Bridge. by MC Shannon Mall, and it's just like it's mind blowing for me, right? One of the first, like, not even like there's a way that we all attach to Run DMC, but I think my real love with it started with MC Shan. Then you hear this song, "The Bridge Is Over," and it's like, okay, they're dissing one of my favorite rappers, but man, this sounds good, and it's bass heavy, and they're like, he's Karis One is he's got this distinct voice. He's telling you these stories, and he keeps talking about this dude Scott LaRock. Like, who is Scott LaRock? Like, I mean, and you kind of understand the story later, and it becomes just like tragedy because in part the reason he ends up a lot of that story, he was a not a truant officer. I'm blanking out on what you want to call the role he did, but he was actually trying to settle beef among some of the gangs there, and ended up being a target by it kind of unintentionally. So it was not like he was out there, like he wasn't like, in church every day kind of a guy, if you will, but he wasn't like out in the streets in that way. He was trying to be something different. So he is one of the first casualties, if you will, that I recall. And then on that list that you had up, I want to say the next one. Can you bring that back up just one quick sec? If you can get to it again.
Paul C.
Paul C. Now, is he from I don't know what he's from, but the next one that stood out to me on that list, and I'm kind of skipping around, was Freaky Todd, because I don't know that I knew that he's not one that I remember as being having been killed. So he's from the Lost Boys. And so I don't think I realized
the
that
Lost Boys.
Yeah.
Hey man, I'm noticing on this list, if it's going in chronological order, how come Eazy-E is not on there?
Well,
because this one is just death.
I did my own sorting here, but I'm going to expand that in a moment. But I just sorted out where someone got shot, beat.
Okay,
like that was their cause of death.
Yeah. So in these, the ones that stand out to me for sure, Scott LaRock, obviously Tupac and Biggie, Big L, Freaky Todd, and Jam Master Jay. That one was a tough one. And then Proof. Little known fact, I actually met Proof once. And I have a few friends that are connected to Eminem through that whole Michigan State connection. So there's a crew of people who have kind of been attached in there. At any rate, one of my buddies, when I was living in Connecticut, they were on tour with Eminem when he was doing the second album. And they had invited me back, like, to hang out at the hotel with them and everything. And Proof was there. And when I was in Connecticut, that's where I lived at the time, I was an insurance agent. And it was crazy because I'm sitting in a room with, like, these different, Eminem wasn't there, but like all the others were there. And Proof is like asking me questions about being an insurance agent. Like, this dude took time. Oh. He's like, so what kind of insurance do you sell? And like, he's asking me all these questions. And I'm like, this dude, like, you're on tour with Eminem and all this other stuff. And we should be talking about music. He's just as interested in what I did as what. That always struck me. So when this incident happened with him, it just was just kind of unfortunate. Like everything surrounding the events of his death are tough. But like I said, he is actually somebody I met, and I, like I said, did have an impact on me. So it's a tough situation there.
Right now, PBS, and I just watched part 1, I think, last night. I don't know if you guys had heard about it, but PBS is doing a thing all month, Black History Month, on hip hop. And it's hosted by, or directed by, or definitely hosted by Chuck D. And something that's interesting, I'm sure someone may be watching this video from New York. They're like, Scott LaRock was the first time y'all kind of associated death in hip hop. But for those of us in Detroit, because Detroit wasn't exactly the bastion of hip hop until Proof, Eminem. I mean, okay, we can go up to Flint with MC Breed, but that was still something different for us. But the part about this PBS special, I'm glad it's 4 parts. The one I watched last night was really pivotal because it was a reminder at how jacked up the Bronx, Harlem was, Brooklyn, how jacked up it was. And we was like, man, we thought Detroit was bad. I mean, when they showed what that was like, I'm sure for those who were on the ground floor for hip hop, death in hip hop, they were, I mean, if we just go back to the message, I mean, they were always linked. But for us, it didn't seem to take place until later.
Yeah, I got you on that.
If I expand this list, and obviously, you know, as I go through this list, let me share it again so you guys take a peek. But when I expand this list, yeah, you know, I think we end up seeing, or even as I go down, I just still leave it more by, you know, drive-by shooting. And Dwayne, you mentioned Big L. I'm just now really getting up on Big L all these years later. And I'm just like, that dude was bad. I mean, it was wow. And
part of it too is, so, you know, I have these different points in hip hop where it's like, this artist made the impact. So from a production standpoint, like Pete Rock and Diamond D, those were like the ones that really started to change. Like I started paying attention to the production, and Diamond D is part of that crew that has Big L in it. So there's that whole Digging in the Crates crew. There's some connectivity in there. So that's basically the way I kind of got into it. Got into him. I still don't know a lot of his music, and it is very tragic what happened. But you know what I just thought about when I talked about Big L?
What's that?
Hood. There is on the Scenario remix, they talk about Hood, and he does actually have lyrics, and his was kind of a similar situation, if I recall. I'm doing this all from memory, so your followers can go and fact check me later. But I do believe Hood that they mentioned there was actually killed in kind of a similar situation, like back from the studio, got held up. But it is definitely, it's the Scenario remix, not the original Scenario that you find on the first Tribe, or it's the second Tribe album, I think. So
yep. Wow, man. Well, I'm going to make some of these connections now.
Yep.
Because you said Pete Rock, and as I expand this list, one of the people that I pulled up here was, of course, Pete Rock, and it made me think, what was one of the other rappers, or one we can't say a rapper necessarily, but the dancer Trouble T. Roy.
Yeah,
that was another one. Like, he died, you know. And again, for my young people that feel like we always existed with the internet, maybe you have, we did. So when you got news that a rapper or somebody died, it was like, how do you find out more? And how did most people, where is it? It's in the source. What is it in? But there was no, let's go check out the website and find out, you know, quickly. One of y'all go ahead and share anything you have. I mean, I got Easy E on here, and I'm going to just pull up a quick picture of Trouble T. Roy so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I recently heard that T. Roy story, and I forget the details of it. Mark, go ahead and drop in what you were about to say.
Just remembering the time around 95 when we heard that Easy E, I mean, it was like, okay, you heard he was sick, and it was like he was gone in an instant. And I associate Easy E's death with two songs for some reason. First of the Month by Bones, and then Keep Their Heads Ringing by Dr. Dre. Every time I hear those songs, I think about Easy E. And it's like, again, this connection, this comparison, this dichotomy of this extreme gangster, and he's suffering in the hospital bed about to pass away. It was just such a shock to me. I'm like, Easy E died? How can Easy E die? I mean,
here's the thing.
Some of these rappers come across as being invincible, and you just, after all of the stuff that they're presenting of the image of a black male, and then he's vulnerable in a hospital, and there's no way to save this man, and he passes away like that. That's what tripped me out.
So I will add on to that. What you have to remember too, and Dev, you hit this one spot on. There was no internet. What you had is, you might have a news, like Urban Radio, is Urban Radio 1. I can't remember. There was one that would come on Sunday nights on certain markets.
Well, do you remember Radioscope?
It's Radioscope. That's the one. You might get something like that on Radioscope. Otherwise, what you were having to do is wait till a song was going to be released about it to look at liner notes or be in the source or something like that. You didn't have, but one of the things with Easy that is probably, because what do they show for the cause of death on that one? Because I'm going to go
Uh,
and bring us full circle.
AIDS, pneumonia, AIDS.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here's what you have to also remember. We were still at a place that the thinking was starting to change. So we're not back in like Rock Hudson's time or when we're and Magic got it. We can talk about some songs that even make some reference to that. Magic got it. That started to make us think a little differently. But even by the time you get to Easy, there's still kind of this idea of like, so like, what did he do to get it? Because it's the and Dev, for obvious reasons, I know this can maybe touch a little home, and so I want to be careful in my words here. But at that time, there was still kind of this stigma with it, and it was like, what was he doing? And to an extent, we had kind of come full circle to this idea of there are ways of no matter what it is you're doing to prevent it. So there was kind of this idea of like to your point, it's like, how did he get in this situation? And it did not seem like of all the ways to go at that time for somebody who had made the noise that he did, that was not the way that you were thinking of him going.
Right.
You could have said, sickle cell anemia. You could have said all the list of stuff that took us, but to have again, you had Magic Johnson who was diagnosed and beat it, if you will. So you're still kind of going to your point, what it was not something that was you couldn't just put it in a perspective, and it's difficult. And even you mentioned heads ringing. It's the other one where they from Dre's album where they kind of make fun of him oh gosh, I can't think of the name of which of the Dre songs it is, but it is off that Chronic album. And that's when you
Dre
first
Day.
start to Dre Day. Yeah, thank you. And that's when you start to understand, oh man, there's like a huge riff within this group. And so like you said, there are some things that definitely and I remember what I was doing when I first heard the news, because you're still kind of going like, what? No, something's wrong here. So, but anyway, I just thought you kind of bring that full circle. That was not, again, I'm putting into my 20-something-year-old self.
Yes.
I can't speak for my 50-year-old self, but my 20-year-old self was going, what's up with that? Something's wrong. Something's off, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, because, I think what makes it interesting, and shout out to the same doctor that was in charge of this last thing that happened in the world. He was in charge back then too. And it just kind of is a trip that you think, and I like what you said, Dwayne, it's like we look at that, what happened with Easy, and it was, how did it happen? Okay, was he promiscuous? But as they had in the movie, the NWA movie, and as Big Les was talking about on an interview recently, even the women had groupies. So, I mean, we watched, every time I watch an Unsung episode with the kids, the rappers are telling a story about, the groupies was coming in. So in other words, it didn't seem like Eazy-E was doing anything any different than anybody else. So it wasn't like he was just being dirty and being promiscuous is how he got the disease. It seemed like it was just the timing. Now, Mark, I know you probably want to say something about Eazy-E because, I mean, and I think it's still valid because I don't know. But hey, Suge Knight is on record making a comment about,
Okay, let me just address that real quick.
Go ahead.
Because we know that Suge Knight, I forget which talk show he appeared on. Was it Jimmy Kimmel or something?
I think it was.
And he made this statement about, somebody jabbing Eazy-E up, because it was a question of how did he just. We heard he was, he was at, the last stage of AIDS, and he was just gone just that quick. It was just like, how did that happen like that? So he put out this conspiracy theory. But, I read recently a couple of years ago, and I don't have a medical background, so I can't explain it how the guy explained it. But he was like, no, it can't happen that way. And he broke down how AIDS breaks down the body. And he was like, no, that's a conspiracy, that he would not have died that way. So it's still a mystery to me, because I'm saying, they say that Eazy-E's wife tested negative. So who can explain that? I'm saying we know a lot of shicey stuff goes down in the music industry. That's something I'm gonna leave alone because I don't want to put nothing else out there. But
exactly,
we can't really say.
I feel exactly what you're putting down there.
And certainly not to be careless in any way, shape, and form. But I will say what makes it, I think, is interesting, especially what you just pointed out, Mark. If we rewind the clock back to 30 plus years ago, if you had any unprotected sex with anyone, we had the belief, similar to what we had just a couple of years ago, that if you come in contact, it's a death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like we said, these folks, a lot of people in let's not even go to hip hop. We can go into the 70s. If anybody watched and listened to all of these David Bowie, Mick Jagger, all entertainers were living. That, it's amazing that we did only lose a handful of entertainers. And it almost seemed like every area, if we go to boxing, you had Tommy Morrison, it seemed like every main area had one person that was kind of representative of AIDS at that time. So it is a trip. But, I think that's yet again what makes this list, let me pop it back up again, what makes this list just so intriguing is that this was still early on where someone passed away and it was like, okay, violence, we got to the point where we could, I don't want to say accept, but by the time Tupac, was killed, by the time Biggie was killed, it was already like, okay, we had almost accepted violence. But then,
so one of the things that I'm going to make this quick because this is something I talked about with my white counterparts at the time. The biggest white musician of our era that had died along that Tupac and Biggie time was Kurt Cobain. And Kurt Cobain, it was suicide, right? So I remember trying to explain to somebody like your suicide is like our drive-by shooting. It is something that like at that time we were at a totally different vibe of how things were. But at that time you were not hearing of Black men in particular committing suicide. Part of it, the argument could be made, some of them didn't live long enough, or in some cases they fought so hard to remain alive that, and there's taboos and everything else in our community at the time that probably prevented some of that, but it was not as rampant as it was in the other side of it. You had, and I will add, one of the things that was jarring about Tupac's death is that you started to feel like he was invincible. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous, but like he would get into so much stuff, fights on set with producers, and he had been shot before. He had gone to jail. Like, he almost started to feel like, well, he can do just about anything. He's going to be fine. I don't really believe that, but you know what I mean.
Let me,
go ahead, Mark.
If you don't mind, just give me maybe a minute to just dive into this. I don't want to open up a rat's nest or anything like that, but at the same time, it's something that has to be brought out. I often, Dev, I've said this to you a number of times, when big shocking news that breaks and it catches your mind off guard and you kind of turn off your thinkers because you're shocked, you're in awe by the news that you're getting, and it like stops you from thinking for a minute. But when you step back and look at all of the evidence that's behind something, some of the things don't really add up the way that the media presents it. I'm not going to get into Tupac because that's a whole show, but I'm just saying I'm to the point now I don't absolutely believe what the media told us about if he in fact died and how he died, if he did die. I'm not putting, like I said, that's a whole nother show. But the other thing I want to point out here, particularly with the newer rappers that's out here these days, there's something in music contracts. It's like called the death clause. Okay. And the death clause, look, this is no conspiracy. Shaka Khan talked about where she says her man, after Whitney Houston, I'm going to say Whitney Houston was killed. Okay. Shaka Khan said that her manager actually told her, I'm more valuable to him dead than she is alive. Now, when you consider the Pop-Tart world of pop music these days, where artists come out, they drop a couple hits and then they disappear. It's like you don't have these long staying artists anymore. The record label's going to make the money off of them while they're hot. And then the point is, if they should happen to die, but some coincidence or whatever, they got all of their music. Okay, you want the new joint? He just got killed 2 weeks ago. We putting it out. That's not a coincidence. So I'm saying this is something that I've looked into for years. This goes way beyond hip hop. This goes into rock. This goes into pop. You mentioned Kurt Cobain, the 27 Club that goes on in rock music, all of these musicians dying at 27. I'm going to just put it out here. That's not a coincidence. There's a whole lot of shady stuff that goes on in the music industry that I won't even speak of here. And that's something that most of these rappers on this list I've never even heard of. You know, I know the big ones and a few of the small ones, but most of them I don't know. And I think some of these can actually be attributed to that, because this guy's not going to be around forever. As a hit maker, he's going to have a couple of hits. Okay, let him put out a couple of hits. We don't have to pay him any more music because he hasn't even he hasn't even recouped yet. So we're going to keep all of this money. And then when we drop his rest of his music, we're going to have all straight profit on that. So that's another element of the game that needs to be discussed one day.
Let me hit on two things, and let me touch back on what Dwayne said. Just let me go a little bit on that sociological side, because Dwayne, I think you were exactly right. I love that. You know, the sociologist Emil Durkheim pointed out that basically when he looked at the groups, bottom line, I'll just paraphrase it: the higher you were in society, the more likely you were to commit suicide, because you basically don't know how to make it to tough times. And so I think you nailed it. I think a lot of these rappers, we don't find suicide rampant, and sadly we find too much. I mean, there's one that I'm looking at right now, but it was somebody in Russia, so I don't even know if they were black or not. But you know, when we look at suicide, I think a lot of these rappers, they rap, going back to the message, they rapped about how hard it was to survive. So that really wasn't our thing. It was always dodging somebody else, more so than dodging themselves. And the part they had to dodge themselves with usually was to stay away from drugs, things like that, because we do have some overdoses here with ODB being on this list, etc. But Mark, let me give you another assist, because while those, I don't have my tinfoil hat around here, you talking that conspiracy stuff, but I will say Coolio on this list, September 28th, 2022. I remember seeing the clip of Coolio basically talking about that death clause as well in an interview. And it was like within, I think it was probably a few months later, then Coolio was gone. So he died of a heart attack. And again, Coolio, you know, right around 59. So he got a few years on us. But, you know, yeah, he's old enough to have a heart attack, quote unquote. But at that same time, I think it's been talked about in the industry enough as proof that, yeah, a lot of these artists are worth far more dead than they are alive. And, you know, like when you're talking about growing old, black men growing old, it does make you wonder. It's like, wow, how come our legends, Michael, Prince, Whitney, they don't get the grow old and die of natural causes for some strange reason? But anyway, so jump back on this list. For some strange reason. You know what? I'm going to say this, and I'm going to pass this back over to you, because everything about those three artists you just named, Prince, Michael Jackson, and Whitney Houston, is just like, to me, it's just an open and shut case. Okay. But I want to pose this question. I know this is about hip hop, but I want to ask you guys this one question when we're talking about MJ. Okay. If Michael Jackson had stayed at the fame of the Off the Wall era versus what he became after Thriller, do you think he would be dead? Ooh. Dwayne, you on mute.
I muted just so that I would just like force myself to listen to what you all were saying. And it was having we recently at work moved to Teams, so I'm losing like sight of how to use Zoom as well. So I apologize there. But so I don't think so. So I am a pretty big Michael Jackson fan. You and I talked about this last time, Mark. I'm a much bigger Prince fan than I was ever of Michael, but they both like serve their purpose. And one of the things that I always talk about, I'm going to bring up somebody else who's controversial right now, but let's just talk about the music on it. On Kanye, one of his like magnum opus albums is Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. If you talk to anybody, it's one of the greatest hip hop albums ever made.
Wow.
It is hands down he made some good albums. But that one was like it almost is like his shark jumping moment, if you will. But there's a TR 808 and Heartbreak. I always say if you don't do TR 808 Heartbreaks, you don't get Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. I always say if there was never an Off the Wall, you never get Thriller. And for so many reasons, Off the Wall is actually a better album.
It is. It is.
It just didn't. Thriller. There's so many things that go into like what makes things great. Whether you're talking sports, music, it's timing, it's technology, it's all these things. Thriller is a good album, one of the best albums ever, but it is not the best album
Stop
that
right
he
there.
made. Yep.
Deb, I'm gonna pass this back over to you, but let me just piggyback
Yeah.
off of what he just said real quick. We're supposed to be talking about hip hop, but this is all music. Here's the thing about MJ when we talk about Off the Wall versus Thriller. Off the Wall was just so much more of a classic. All right. If you look at MJ's career, if you look at Off the Wall, Bad, and Thriller, they all had the same elements. It seemed like he replaced each track and says, okay, this is going to be Beating on this album. This is going to be The Girl Is Mine on that album. And he had this formula going. My thing about MJ is that I have to realize somewhere along my years of enjoying music that record sales don't say that this is the best album. This is just a big selling album. It's arguable. I don't think this can be disputed. Thriller would have sold somewhere around the same numbers as Off the Wall if it hadn't been for his music videos. That's what pushed Thriller over the edge, period. Off the Wall to Michael Jackson was Prince's 1999 in terms of how a particular album prepared them for the stratosphere.
Well, I'm going to tie this all in. I am going to tie this all in because we could almost even go down the list of rappers that worked with MJ that are gone. And the first one that jumped up to my mind was Heavy D.
Dang, right.
Yep.
Bundily D. And that kind of, stems back off of Trouble T. Roy. But Heavy D died, he died November 8th, 2011. He was 44.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was that young, but I think about it now. Yeah, I was 41.
Yeah.
And so, and they had a cause of death that's listed here was a blood clot in his lung. Now, one thing, let me tie this in as well. We mentioned MJ and Prince, two dudes that actually were pretty known for their healthy lifestyles in terms of what they put in their bodies. And then we get to Heavy D. Heavy D was heavy, but it was like similar to the Fat Boys. We look back because of our age, it was like, man, they were big, they were huge. And I have to say this, Kuraski here in the middle, folks. Kuraski is not a fat boy any longer. Dude hit the gym, he slimmed down. So I think they said Buff was probably, if I remember correctly, they said he was like 500 pounds or something when he passed away. Prince Monkey D, he had actually lost weight. And Prince Monkey D was never really that fat.
No, he was chubby.
Right. All of these cats, a lot of these guys were chubby. And even if we look back at Heavy D, and now that we in that age group, we know a lot of cats that are bigger than those guys.
Hold it. You talk about 500 pounds. That's what I heard Big Pun weighed before he passed away.
He's an example of one that was pretty big.
That was a big dude.
He performed that big. I mean, for real, when you look at Big Pun, it's like, in all due respect, because I'm going to put Big Pun up there in the legends as well.
Oh, for sure.
It's like, man, for that dude to be able to flow the way he flowed, as big as he is, I'm gonna give him some right.
I literally, there's a guy that I work with. Well, he actually left the farm, but we still keep in touch. And he's a huge Big Pun fan. He's originally from Puerto Rico, and so he has this affinity for Big Pun. And he was playing, I forget which song it is, but he says something about Little Italy, literally from Little Italy. It's like his cadence is just ridiculous. And I said to him, when you look at that, and this is all of what you're talking about, I remember watching a documentary with Outkast, and they talked about how they got prepared when they were doing the first album. Their manager or whatever would take them and run around the block all these times to help them practice their breath control so that they could perform. So you think about somebody like Big Pun, if he didn't have all the weight to contend with, like the breath control that he did, it's like, I don't even understand how it defies every logical thing. And to your point, if he had gotten the right, you look at Fat Joe now, another one that is like, they got the message, they understood it, and it was tough even for like me at times. I have never really struggled with my weight issues, but I'm not necessarily the most healthy eater. I have these phases that I'll kind of go through. So what can happen is I get a little nervous because it's like, I don't have the same incentive, but I do still have, like, I got the genetics, if you will. And so you need to, like, it's still something that stays top of mind. But I kind of got off into a tangent there, but you hit the nail dead on the head with a Big Pun there. Like, he's somebody we shouldn't have had to lose, but he just didn't get the memo in time, right? And you can say, well, everybody knew, like, you know better and blah blah blah. He
Hey
just didn't
man,
have the fortune of getting it in time.
I'm absolutely. I don't believe he died in the year 2000. It does not seem. If somebody would have asked me when Big Pun died, I would have said 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. I'm looking at 2000. Really?
That might have to be.
He died before September 11th. That's just hard to believe to me.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, here's a question for y'all then, because I do know, listening to interviews of Biggie before he passed away, Biggie, and I don't know if it was the weed or what it was, but Biggie did sound like he was already having some breathing issues, because he'd be sitting back. Had Biggie not been killed, I hate to be morbid, but quite honestly, seriously, because he already sounded pretty bad. Would this dude would he be able to say, if he had not gotten himself under control,
right,
he'd been able to still be here? Because again, this is another legend. What, just 2 albums before he got killed?
Yep.
Dang, where's Bushwick Bill on this list?
I did see Bushwick Bill down here. Got Fire Prodigy. I put in blue.
Yeah, there you go. Cancer.
That's what I couldn't remember, because it seemed like there had been rumors about Bushwick Bill for quite some time before he passed away.
Right. Yeah.
And and cancer actually, again, when we look at those 10 causes of death, cancer appears on this list. If we go back, matter of fact, let me do some sorting here, because I think we get to cancer, we get to also the same thing with Guru.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So some of the other ones I'm not familiar with.
Well, Jimmy Spicer. Jimmy Spicer is part. Jimmy Spicer is part of that. Like old school. I think he's the one that made the song "Dollar Bills."
Oh, he was 61. Yeah, back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but that's relative. That's still youngish.
Yes.
But
yes.
But I can't get this. Ever since you made the statement a few minutes ago, I cannot get this one line out of my head, and it will almost put a bow on everything we talked about. Is that I'll be an MC until I'm old and gray, and I'll even rock the mic with tooth decay. Courtesy of Biz. Like you said, these guys did not think that they were going to, die prematurely. Yeah. None of us really do. But it is just it is a tough one, and he was doing a lot of stuff when it was probably already too late to really kind of get himself in better health, and it just caught up to him.
Hey man, where did you get this list from?
rapfandom.com.
What's it called?
rapfandom.com.
Now, what did they have as a cost to MF Doom?
MF Doom is...
They never...
I want to talk about that, yeah.
I never heard why it seemed like his wife never issued a statement on that, just said he passed away.
So it has never been the case. At a point, I had a working theory that it could have been, but for whatever reason, they've held that
unknown.
And remember, the big issue with this is that they announced it the last day of December. But it had, and we talked about this, I think, in the last one. And this, and he had actually died on
October
Halloween.
31st.
Yeah. So
that's wow.
Yeah.
So why do you have a theory that it could have been suicide? And this is another one, because Mark actually turned me on MF Doom, because he was one that definitely went past me when he was out. So what's the significance?
Yeah. So first of all, if you MF Doom's, I got to pause for a second before I get too emotional. But so one of the reasons I think it was shrouded in secrecy. It kind of came as a shock. And there's still been, to this day, there has not been any talk of it. So it feels like there's something there. But one of the things, and I'm going to state the obvious, and I don't mean to insult anybody's on this call's intelligence, but remember, MF Doom is actually part of KMD. And so if you ever just like, there's so much in his death that got created, as far as like videos. You can find yourself in a YouTube like deep dive, because there's so much about like how he left and went and reinvented himself. I do believe he probably battled with a form of depression. The other thing that people don't remember is Zev Love X. Well, he was Zev Love X, but um, his brother, who was also part of KMD, you know, he was tragically killed
Right.
in a car. He was crossing like the Long Island Expressway, something like that. I can't remember. It was hit by a car. And then Doom's son died tragically about a year or so before Doom himself died. And so there's some things that I think those are some of the reasons why I believe that may be the case. But like, you know, now we're getting up towards, what is it, 3 years? It'll be 3 years. There's still no real
No
explanation.
statement.
But
Yeah.
I, like you, had left hip hop a bit for a while, and where I kind of discovered Doom, and it took me years to realize he was KMD, is when he was on Rock Cocaine Flow with De La Soul. Rock Cocaine Flow is off of the Grind Date album. It is possibly like, it's probably my second favorite De La Soul song. And it's produced by Jake One. The beat is phenomenal. The rapping is great. Like, it's a gem of a song. And that was what pulled me kind of back, started pulling me back into the world of Doom. Because I had, like I said, I had totally missed all of what he was doing, and you know, the multiple personalities, and you know, there's rumors that sometimes he never actually showed up at shows, that he was using body doubles.
Faking, like, he was using.
It's just, I mean, the stuff that's out there about him is just, what he managed to do is to create just this huge legacy. And what people don't also know is, like, the true heads of him know this, he was a phenomenal producer. He was one of those rare talents, and like, there's always going to be more like questions than there ever will be answers for him.
You know, we're going to talk about Doom for a minute, because I said,
hold on.
What's up?
Y'all got to get the likes up, because this is good stuff. This is good stuff. We got the De La Soul expert, and now Mark is about to be the MF Doom expert. Because now that was a fastball down the pipe. So y'all, while Mark is flowing, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Go ahead, Mark. MF.
Hey man, seriously. I came across MF Doom by accident, because, as I said, where hip hop and rap was going, it was like, I got this I think he's from Flint. I can't remember the brother's name, but there's a rapper from Flint, and he's like, look, we got hip hop and we got hip hop, right? Man, this is another guy that saved it gave me some more hope that there's still good hip hop out here. You just got to look for it. I got to remember that brother's name. Incredible rapper. I think he's from Flint. But my cousin came to my house sometime in the early 2000s. No, I want to say 2008, 9, somewhere in there. And he had this external hard drive. He dropped all this music on my computer. He dropped like 50 gigs of music on my hard drive. And I'd hard to get through all of that stuff. And I just happened to see a couple of these. Okay, MF Doom, King Gajor, Victor Vaughn. I'm like, what is this? Man, I clicked that. I got into the Food album like 8-9 years after it came out. I'm like, who is this dude? He be coming up with the craziest samples. This dude puts out all instrumental loop albums. And I'm like, he's digging in the crates. He's doing these collaborations with Madlib, and Madlib is an incredible DJ. This dude is sampling music from all over the world. This is what I'm saying about where hip hop can take you. I mean, MF Doom, he mixed. If you ever heard the Food album, this dude mixed together the Electric Company, Sesame Street, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and all of this stuff. My kids like this because this is the stuff they're watching in the cartoons. And it's like, man, that to me, Food is one of the just most incredible hip hop albums, because he made that whole album so fun. He mixed comedy in there. One of y'all remember the line when he said on one of his songs, he was like, rap snitches telling all their business. And he says, And he was like, take them to court. They'd be their own star witness. Did you see the perpetrator? Yeah, I'm right here.
Right here. Mess around, get the whole.
You know, there's a good clip of Most Def or Yasin
I
Bey.
saw that.
Yep.
I saw that.
Where he does it. He talks about that. It's phenomenal.
What killed me about that is I didn't notice the humor in that because I was so into the loop of the sample that it took Most Def to say that I'm like, damn, he did say that. You got to go back. You got to push the rewind button and hear some of the stuff some of these dudes be saying. It was like, you know, I picked up this back. She was uncouth, you know, spitting all out the sunroof through her missing tooth. I'm like, damn, who would say something like that? Yeah, man, I miss MF Doom. That dude, that period between like 2004 and I don't know, maybe 2009, he just couldn't make a bad album. Like I really, he was the one who gave me faith to say, keep digging for good hip hop because it's out here. It just ain't on the radio.
Yeah. And so I like I said, it wasn't until, like I said, I discovered him on the Rock Cocaine Flow. And then I have kind of dabbled in some different things. I've got Mad Villain on Wax. Mm-hmm. I've got I don't think I might have Food on Wax. I'm gonna have to go back and look for that. But one of my favorite songs from him is was it Strange Ways? It's off the Mad Villain. And the sample is I think Little Giant or something like that. And it's just like when you like it, the two of them together is masterful. But Dooman on himself, he is one of the best. Like he is the underground treasure of like beat all making. Things, and it is unfortunate he has become bigger in death, as many do. Than
is that true?
Was in life. I think that there are more people who now have discovered him and, you know, kind of put him in that list in a way that I don't feel like people were talking about him before. Like, I just don't think he got the flowers the way he probably should have.
No, he didn't.
Just my opinion. So,
but he was still part of that underground, you could say. I was surprised every now and then when I talk to people, I'm surprised how many people know who he is or who he was, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
But the Victor Vaughn album, dude, he had this female rapper in one of those cuts. Do you have a Victor Vaughn, the one in the black and white cover?
I don't have that. So I don't have that one. I don't know if I know the songs on that one. But I was, every once in a while, I have this playlist that I put, I call it 1, 2, 3. And I spell it out WON, then 2 and 3. And what it is supposed to be, and I've made it all kinds of things, but it's supposed to be like, if you took this song that got sampled, then somebody sampled that. But as we were already talking about this, we'll bring this full circle. There's one of the Karis One or BDP songs he samples for Super Hope. And it is now I'm blanking out on what the Doom song is. But the original song is by a woman. It's like Last Night I Had a Ball. I really had some fun. I'll look this up so I can give you. But again, it's just this way that Doom samples stuff that you like most wouldn't. He samples obvious stuff, then he'll sample stuff that is like just so obscure. And I'll find it on the playlist. You all keep talking while I bring that up.
Look, mad props because them dudes started sampling Brazilian music, and I'm like, dude, this is my stuff. Madlib did a whole beat album of Brazilian music. I'm like, oh my God, he's taking my stuff. That, you know, the world of Brazilian music is something that people still are not up on. Very few Brazilian artists make it onto, you know, like the top 100 or anything because, you know, obviously they sing in Portuguese, but it's a treasure chest of incredible music there. And man, I'm not going to tell this story today, but one day I have to tell you this story of how hip hop American rappers brought this obscure Brazilian album to the forefront from 50 years ago. The album was completely unknown. The record company of this Brazilian artist thought that his album was like a Frisbee. They thought his album was so whack that they took all of the press copies of his albums and recorded another album on his own vinyl.
Oh my gosh.
Just totally erased. It's like, this is a piece of Frisbee. You know, this is some trash, right? Man, MF Doom sampled it. Madlib sampled it. Ludacris sampled it. It's at least 7 American hip hop albums
Wow.
artist who discovered this little known album. They brought this guy out of obscurity from Brazil. He was on the Red Bull podcast. If you look it up on YouTube, this dude is on
Okay.
there. It was like, because of the samples, he got a little bit of money from that. It's one of the most incredible
Wow.
stories I've ever heard. And this is
Wow.
Brazilian music. Yeah.
Wow. So the song that I was trying to, so in order, it is Last Night Changed It All. That's Esther Williams. Then it's Superhole by Boogie Down Productions. Then the song, the MF Doom one, is Dead Bent. And so as a Doom fan, I know you know Dead Bent.
What album is that on?
So Dead Bent is actually on is on, hold on. That one is, hold on a second. Doomsday. That's on Operation Doomsday.
Dang, that's one of my favorites right there.
Yeah. And so
see, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. I don't, some of the times, because I'll know the flow, but I don't know the name of the song. Yeah.
And part of it too, sometimes when you're like doing your digging, you'll hear a song and the sample has been there right in front of you the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened with this one. It's like, he's sampling, the Scott LaRock kind of, he's a super, like, it's the way he's kind of looping it. But yeah, I'm sure you've heard the Dead Bent, and I'm sure you've heard the Scott LaRock, the BDP one before, because it's off of that Criminal Minded album.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I did hear you when you said like you didn't listen to BDP at first, and I can totally understand that. It was not, it wasn't for everybody at first. It
didn't hit me the way Public Enemy did. I'll say it that way.
Yeah,
Public Enemy,
for sure.
The way they put those beats together, man, I'm like,
yeah.
Damn, they would have. Have any one of you guys listened to Paul's Boutique?
Yeah.
So that is an album that I have never given the right
me either
attention to.
But they say
everybody will always say that's good.
It's a classic, but they say it's a classic, and they say this is one of the most. They say they use the most samples in that album, like in the history of hip hop on one album. How many samples they had on that album? So I was never a Beastie Boys fan. But I want to be able to check that out one day just to hear what all the hype was all about. So you never got into Paul's Boutique either?
I didn't. I liked the original, the first Beastie Boys album. The other thing that I did, and I just realized I need to plug my computer up here. The other thing is they did like a tribute thing on Apple TV. It was very well done. And they were, other than like De La Soul, and I'm slowly bringing it back over there, Dev. Other than De La Soul, the Beastie Boys were one of the longest running hip hop groups until the death of
MCA.
So yeah, and so that was also kind of the thing about De La Soul is like, hey, like they're one of the longest running intact hip hop group. And there was always something to be said about that. But Dev, we need to. I know you can edit some of this out, and we're just kind of spitballing now. But there was. I want to make sure I take some point and kind of circle back to some of the De La Soul stuff. For sure, like I said, there's a part of it where when something like this happens, you feel like you lost somebody you knew. Like I've met each of them at least once. But like, not in certain situations, it was nothing more than being at the end of a concert and being able to shake their hand or something like that. But, like I said, I was there from like the first album. They picked content that was, so different. They worked with Dilla. Dilla is one of the reasons that, he became Dilla is in part, a lot of it has to do with Q-Tip, because Q-Tip is really the one that kind of came about finding him or whatever, or discovering like this dude from Detroit, if you will. But the way that they always were consistent with their music, they never disappointed. They had good features. They had, we were talking about Shaka Khan. Remember, she was on one of their songs. They had Red Band. They had Doom. They had Beastie Boys. You were just talking about the Beastie Boys. They have on the album that's right before the one that I have back here in the background. It was supposed to be it's like the first installment of their artificial intelligence. they have a song called Squat, and it's a phenomenal,
Mm-hmm.
like if you like B-boy music, Squat with De La Soul and BC Boys is just phenomenal lyricism. There's no words to it. And one of the things is like De La Soul is one of the best lyrically, and they just never really got the credit. And it's been talked about quite a bit. There's a weird way that, obviously we know that the catalog is about to release next week. So the timing has been like just kind of terrible on all that. But I keep being like afraid that this generation has heard so much about it that they might be a little bit disappointed because they don't know how to appreciate it for what it is. And a lot of times when I get into something that I've never listened to before that people talk about, I have to put myself in the time of what that was. What else was going on?
Exactly what I wanted to say. You
Yep.
can't appreciate what another producer comes and brings into the game until you see where it was before. If you listen to Dre's career from the first NWA albums, I mean, you just hear a natural progression in the way he kept updating his sound. It's amazing to me. Let me go back to one other thing, and I'm gonna pass it back over to Dev. Jay Dilla. First of all, this dude, this is before I really got off into my Brazil thing. And when I heard Running Away, I'm like, damn, what is that? And he sampled us a Brazilian song. But what trips me out about Jay Dilla, sometimes you can't appreciate what somebody does until somebody breaks it down to you. Man, somebody on YouTube broke down how Jay Dilla would patch his music. He'll take the 3rd second of this part of the song and put it with the 12th part of the 12th second part of the song, and then take a little part from the 39th second and put all that stuff together in a seamless mix. Dang. And it sounds perfectly mixed. It's like, how did he do that? You know what a sense of timing you got to have to be able to take little bits and pieces. He would sample songs where he would take a break of the beat from before when the guy starts singing to right after he stopped singing, and then mix that with another part. I'm like, man, how did he do that? If you don't understand, Jay Dilla will blow your mind, because there's no way. Somebody had to really break this down in the video for me to really appreciate what this dude used to do.
Yes, they refer to it, and I still have to. My son had just sent me a video the other day, and it is on this Dilettante. I haven't made time to read this book yet. I got it like as soon as it came out, and my son knew I had it, and he says, "Well, I'm showing you this video. It's a guy who actually I think was like a drummer or a bassist for Nas at some point, and it's called Digging in the Greats is his series.
I love that channel.
And he broke down just what you were talking about. And part of it is that they were saying is that it was always assumed that he was doing certain things like by mistake. And they're saying like what they're starting to realize as they go back and look at it, it was very intentional. It was, it's that almost like that offbeat, the way jazz is. That's one of the things that they talk about. It's one of the most significant art forms since jazz because of his what seems random to us is actually, it follows a certain kind of a pattern that he only understood. And so even though it sounds like it's disjointed, but it's perfectly, the distortion is it's like what you're hearing between the spaces, if you will.
That's what I'm saying.
So I had searched long and hard for one of his the samples he used, and I may have talked about this the last time we were here. And there's a song, it's called it's off the Donuts album.
Damn,
like to talk about donuts is like to say like it's like talking about Thriller, right? It's like, it's like you're not really a fan if you're talking just donuts, but there's a song on there, Anti-American Graffiti. And the sample is, I actually just found another part of the sample. I always knew it was Wolfman Jack, but I could never figure out how. And I started doing some of my deep researching, and it's a comedic like album that's made in the way of like what's supposed to be Monty Python. And Wolfman Jack was actually one of the voice talents. So when you listen to this album, I listen, and certain sites will help you know exactly where to look for the sample. But it's like 30 minutes into this like narrative, and he finds this part and he takes all of it And then, but the record I was looking for is a group called 1010. They are one of the people in it is part of like the Brothers Gibb. Like he's not one of the Bee Gees, but one of the like the brothers of one of the. He's not part of the big group, but the song is called Family Tree. If you Google it and Dev, if you're not familiar with the Dilla song, Anti-American Graffiti, you can probably just find it on YouTube. Find that song and then find the song 1010. And it's called Family Tree. And it will help you understand, like if you didn't already, like most people who are in hip hop understand the brilliance of Dilla. But that song for me, for whatever reason, just hearing that and going, how did he think to do that? And then, like I said, about a week ago, because it's Dilla month, everybody's kind of talking. I found this other thing, and I'm going, this man was just brilliant. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
Well, for the sake of time, let's go ahead because it's later for y'all.
Yes, yeah,
it is.
Yes, sir.
It is.
We promised we were going to, and it didn't work. We got too excited.
Hey, I told y'all I cushioned 2 hours.
Yep.
Just in case.
Yep. No, I got you, brother.
But here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to bring this back around. And I'm gonna let me start out just by saying again, y'all, if you like the stuff, like and subscribe below. But again, the whole goal, and I think y'all just did a brilliant job. You expanded even more because you brought in the relevancy of hip hop.
Yeah.
I was talking about the people that we lost, but y'all expanded it to why hip hop itself is so valuable, and where I try to get to my kids to really see, y'all don't know how honored I feel to have grown up with this music.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about Dilla, you talk about all these people, even going to Dre, even Mark, your boy 50 Cent. I mean, the bottom line still is that you got the good cousins, you got the bad cousins. They family though, they fam. And whether we like them or not, quick story, I got to tell this because I put it on IG. My son and I were at a car show a couple of weeks ago, and we sitting there, and we just sitting there eating some McDonald's or whatever. And this old white lady, almost like it was a bunch of traffic coming in. It's a car cruise, everybody coming in. Old white lady slows down, stops her car, lets her window down, yells out the passenger window to us, because the Super Bowl was in Phoenix. Snoop Dogg was performing over at the casino that was like a mile away or so. But that was yesterday. This old white woman just says, y'all missed a good concert. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, first of all, why she rolling up? If I was in the hood, I thought she was about to pull a drive-by for us. Thought it would have been Boys in the Hood. I'll go do the Ricky in a second. But, it was, she goes, y'all missed a good concert. And I'm like, really? Who was that? Snoop Dogg. And it was like, that's it.
It's the Martha Stewart effect.
Yeah.
It's the Martha Stewart effect.
Well, exactly. And of course, it was like, how we missed it? Number one, this Saturday, and the concert was Friday. But It just goes to show she's going to relate everything. She sees some black dudes, and for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's Black History Month, she was doing her good thing, going to church, saying, I spoke to black guys. Yeah. But she's going to relate it to hip hop, which again, that's that part of the fam that even though I'm not a huge Snoop Dogg fan, Snoop Dogg is still part of the hip hop fam, because all I know is I think I put on my IG that I don't listen to Snoop Dogg, and I put down the text that that's not 100% true. I don't really listen to Snoop Dogg, but look, you going to throw on some deep cover. It's like, because in Doggy Style, that's the Snoop I remember. And it still ties into health. I'm going to bring all of that back. Because Snoop Dogg is almost one of those, Dwayne, that you were talking about being invincible. Because for a while, that dude didn't seem like he was going to be here with us or not. Because he was
exactly
much as well. And so I'm going to pop up real fast on the screen of the people. This is the relevancy, the impact of hip hop. And so when I'm talking about the people, and these guys are elaborating more on the impact of what these folks had on us growing up, for these dudes not to be able to grow old with us. Here's Scott LaRock that we were speaking of. Now, of course, we still got the legend KRS-One. But as we said, every record he talked about DJ Scott LaRock, Trouble T. Roy, and of course we're gonna see Heavy D. But then we get to Pete Rock and CL Smooth doing They Reminisce Over You. Now, my sons got into that song, but they didn't really know the history of Trouble T. Roy behind that song. And then, of course, Heavy D. Guru.
Fife.
Yeah.
Dave.
Where we all started the conversation. Then there's that connection.
For sure.
And Mark, you touched a little bit on the West Coast.
Oh man, Souls of Mischief. Yeah, man.
Yeah, so I put 93 Till Infinity as one of my favorite.
Oh my God.
I have a top 10. It includes Gin and Juice, which is Snoop. But Dev, man, we always run out of time. That whole like Bay Area connection. So, Mark, you touched on some stuff there. I did not understand the history, and I can't imagine Dev doesn't know it, because as a kid, I remember when he would go out there, it felt like at least once a summer to that area. And when you understand, like, you've got Sly and the Family Stone, and you've got like Tower Power, like all these different
Santana.
And exactly. And so I remember when Tony was still Tony, and they were in an interview, and they were like, it was probably Raphael Sadiq, because he's always been the most vocal and the most long staying. But he said in the interview, it was like on Soul Train or something, he said, like how nowadays everybody has a rap group. He said, when we were coming up in the Bay Area, everybody had a band. And so you look at those influences that are there from the Bay Area. One of the my favorite hip hop songs that never gets the praise that it's due is by Casual, who's from that Bay Area. It's called That's How It Was and That's How It Is. I put that, depending on which day you talk to me, I put that in like my top 10 sometimes. And if you, again, put that on your list, go back and listen to that. It was just great flowing. And it was to the point you made, Mark. The first time I saw the Far Side in a video was the first time I thought, okay, so California can make music like the East Coast that I can get into with Dell and people like that. So, I never can hear like a Bay Area artist without thinking of Dev, like I said, because of all the time I knew you spent out in that area. And I forget which part of your family has that connection there, but
up in the Bay Area.
I got to throw this out here. Man, we're going to end this in 5 minutes, okay? We're past midnight here. I'm going to just toss this out because he took it out to the Bay. Think about the connections, man, because when you talk about the Bay, I mean, damn, you're going to Too Short, right? But I'm not going to go into Too Short. But the thing is,
Hammer,
the Bay, Tower
whether
Power,
you like it or not, like them or not.
Yeah. Okay, but man, this is so deep. Now you brought up Hammer. Hammer, the producer behind his biggest album, was actually one of the members of Confunction. So he brings that funk element, okay? The other thing about the Bay, okay, you brought up Sly and the Family Stone, then we got Santana, Tower Power out there. But this is what kills me. Prince was once trying to get Tony on his record label, okay? There's two connections here with the Oakland sound, okay? Because Prince, if you remember Tony's song, Born Not to Know, I think it was Born Not to Know, and they says, look, things are getting crazy, I ain't wearing Paisley. They was talking about Prince, because they was like, y'all, you see what Prince would do with his acts. It was like, no, we don't want no part of that. And then Prince when he broke up the Revolution, he took all of the musicians out of the Sheila E. band from Oakland and brought them into Minneapolis. Man, when we start building maps of music, it would just crisscross all over the place. And it's like, you don't know where all these connections come from.
So, Dev, I want you to finish that PowerPoint you have put together, because I want to see what else you had there.
Let's do it.
And feel free to jump in like y'all did. That was perfect. If you got a story on some of them, because next was back, we talked about the Jungle Brothers. And of course, you still got the Tribe in this one as well with De La. Then, I didn't wear my Houdini. Shirt, I thought my name
is Jalil, not John Little. That's what he said.
I mean, when you look at Ecstasy, this one shocked me when he passed away.
Yeah,
Because
it
I
was
was a
tough.
big Houdini fan, and
Yep.
of course, like y'all were saying earlier, it's like there's a Houdini that everybody knew. I think when they did Open Sesame and they really went
Yep.
pop. To me, no, the real Houdini was Big Mouth, Escape, Fugitive,
Yep.
5 Minutes of Funk. That was the real Houdini, namely
that's another song that got me into hip hop was 5 Minutes of Funk. I still remember,
Yeah.
if y'all remember back in the 80s, hip hop still hadn't crossed over yet. You still had to turn on to 98 FM for that 2 hours of hip hop on Saturday nights. Remember that?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Now here's what's funny, because we all come from a similar junior high, and in y'all case, elementary school. When our class was graduating 8th grade, you know how you vote on the song that it should be the class song?
Yeah. Yeah.
What people do for money, I will never forget.
Oh, man.
And I heard that song the other day.
Dang.
And, now mind you, because I was a good Christian kid and wasn't allowed to listen to secular music, it was like, what song is that? I don't know that song. And now that I'm familiar with that song, it was like, that's what you gotta love about, because then I would go to a white school just a year later. That's what you gotta love in a black school. Because how culturally relevant was that the class is like, we should make our song what people do for money.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That would be our reality, especially in the 80s.
And that's a big L.
Big L. Big L.
The big pun.
Big pun.
Big pun.
Right.
Yeah. Fat Boys.
Oh, you
shout out to I'm sure that coat in the middle is a Dapper Dan original. And
I just watched
get going on that too.
Yep. And I threw this in when we were just talking, and I threw it in for a reason, but let me jump down one more, because we talked about Jay Dilla.
Yep.
I threw this one in while y'all were talking for a reason. If there was one dude that always talked about, or was always, I'll say, revered for staying in shape, was LL.
Yep.
We go back to him in Crush Groove when he came in, and they act like they were gonna shoot him, and he came in and was like, box.
Yeah.
And so LL, all through the years, and I didn't like him as much during those middle years because he wanted to be Mr. Ladies Man, and he running around with no shirt on. But now, all these years later, if anything, I have to give props to LL, because he personified living that fit lifestyle, number one. Number two, he's still in the game. And to me, he personifies the one rapper that we just got done saying that, again, whether it's foul play or not, of entertainers that didn't get a chance to live long. But it's almost like he is that one rapper that I think is the one that all the rappers would like to be. And what I mean by that is,
for sure,
in their 50s and their 60s, they still
longevity.
They got the longevity. Instead of, we ain't even gonna go into how many of them probably got ripped out of their money too. So that's a whole other story. But I'm just saying that longevity of being healthy, that if we went and saw LL do a concert, I got a feeling it would probably be close to what it was with Fresh Fest.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Instead of, being up on stage.
So, and to that point, whenever I talk about that, remember there was a point where someone was just, they didn't have the catalog. Like there was a point where if it was a rap concert, you expected to see like 5 or 6 acts. You weren't going to see like a single. It was a long time before a single act could command enough to, to just hold their own.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
What else you got? You got, so your LL.
That was it. That was it for
that.
That's
it. Okay.
I had
so one other quick
MCA,
thing,
but I didn't show a picture.
It's one thing I'm going to do, and I have to do this. This is for your son, for Corey. So, and if hopefully he'll watch this, and hopefully if you talk to him next, you express this for me. When Takeoff was killed, who's part of the Migos, I watched the post that he was putting up. He was in a state of pain, and I don't think he understood that there were people like me who understood exactly what he was feeling. In part because I had been introduced to the Migos by through the show Atlanta with Donald Glover, first season I think it was, and Takeoff was the kind of the glue behind the group, the Migos. If you were to just randomly pick up a Migos song, I don't think either one of you would like them. But if you took time to digest, you would find that they were an extremely talented group. And like I said, I felt the pain for him that he was going through, because there are those very rare groups that like have that impact on you. And they definitely were that group that in like this modern era of hip hop, I believe that probably like that is their version. Because I talked to my kids at length about it because they were pretty torn up about it. This is their
Hmm.
Tupac or Biggie.
Mm.
What? Really?
Yeah, it's oh yeah. Take off it, and plus you have to remember the connections. So take off. They as a group, they're all family members.
Hmm.
Um, take off and Quavo, I think I'm pronouncing his name right. They're nephew and uncle, and then Offset is the other person in the group. He is a cousin of one of them, and then Cardi B
Hmm.
is married to one of them.
Hmm.
So and they were all together when this happened. That's what also makes
Dang.
this. So it is it's kind of fallen out of the news cycle just a little bit,
Hmm.
but it is definitely so. Next, hopefully, when Corey watches this, he will see like there are people from the other generation who
Yeah.
understands what this felt like. And I did try to, like, as he was posting a couple of things, I tried to say to him like, I understand you may not think there's like somebody in this generation who understands what this is like for you, but I definitely understand. So that was not it definitely is going to be one of the darker moments in hip hop for a generation.
Hmm. I didn't
Man,
know it was that significant. Really didn't.
I'm glad you said that, because then I want to move on to probably the closing question, or maybe one more, just so we don't have to end completely on bad. But I think I'm glad you did that, because that's a great question. And I'll throw it over to you, Mark, to start us off, and then Dwayne, please chime in. But all of these rappers that we just looked at on that long list, as you think back, even now, how do you feel? What is your gut visceral reaction when you hear one of your contemporaries in hip hop pass away? What's kind of the first thing that goes to your mind, and how does it relate to you?
Well, when I consider this, I mean, I had no idea. You said it was something like 600 rappers have died, have been killed, or whatever. Did you say 600 something?
Yeah, just on this list that they compiled, it was 627 names.
Okay, so what I feel with that is, uh, entertainers are supposed to represent some sort of extravagant lifestyle. They're supposed to represent they made it, they got out, they succeeded. But what the death of all of these rappers shows me is that it's no escape. It's like it's taking a glass and scooping a glass into a swimming pool. You got representative of that whole swimming pool in that glass right there. So you can't separate that glass of water from the pool that it comes from. So whether they succeeded in going up the financial ladder, socioeconomically, they represent exploitation, like Black folks have always been. They're getting the short end of the stick in the music industry. When they finally are supposed to be at a point in their life that they can enjoy this, they die, which is also representative of Black folks. We cannot separate the plight of all of these rappers dying young from the overall community that they come from. It just represents it. You can't separate them from that. It's like, even living a good lifestyle that they're supposed to have, because we know all of these rappers they're video rich. They're not really rich. They got to tour excessively. They don't get all the royalties. If you see how much money people are making on Spotify, Anita Baker had to expose that. Like, wow, you're getting like a quarter of a penny for downloads or something like that. So I can't separate their death from the overall plight of the Black community, because it fits so perfectly. You can't separate them. It's like, they're rappers, they're supposed to have money, but they don't suddenly become, middle class white just because they're successful rappers at a certain point. I can't separate them from their origins. I would put it that way.
Dwayne, you.
So yeah, so I'll just have to always go back to probably the ones that were the most jarring. Obviously, we still fresh off the one with Dave. Before that, I would say most jarring was probably Fife, and I'll stop there because there are others, because we talked about this the last time. But those two, I feel like we grew up together. We, you talk about these people who impacted your life that you never met, and it's just music. Like, they gave you, like, you don't know them from, anybody else really, but they like that collective, the Native Tongue Collective. They are the soundtrack to some of the best years of like my life. I'm always
Mm.
looking forward to what's in, let's keep living in that. Like my best days are not behind me. It's nothing like that. But those are fond memories, and it literally is a soundtrack to a portion of my life.
Mhm.
And because Dave was sick, I'll make these couple things really quick as I can. There was a concert that Mace had to cancel about 6 or 7 months ago, and he started off the post with, "I have some very disappointing news," and I kept like, I remember wanting to like pick up a phone and call him and yell and say like, when there's a member of your group that we've been watching kind of teeter with health, like don't start off a post with, "I've got disappointing news." And it was one of those things where it's like, what will I do if that like does happen? And then it happened, obviously a couple weeks ago. It's tough. It is. I feel like I lost somebody that I knew, grew up with. And one of the things is we look for, I am one of these people that almost at a fault at times. You look for other people to hear from them to say, like, help this make sense, if you will. And today on social media, Puss and Mace finally broke their silence.
Mm.
It was what I had been waiting for. And it is, I will prepare you if you follow them on any kind of social media or if you go out there, it is gut wrenching.
Mm.
They pour their hearts out. But it's part of what I think the fan base has been kind of looking for to kind of start, putting this in perspective. So,
Mm. Okay.
but
Guys,
I'm
I
always
can't.
going to have the music. I'm going to have the music. So
That's all I
the
can
main thing.
say. That's what it is. The music stays. You listen to their music and they're still here. I'll leave it that
Yep.
way.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is a perfect way to put an exclamation mark on it. I can't add anything to y'all said because y'all took everything and then something I would have said. All I will say is kind of to make it more applicable to the audience out there is this month, Black men, go to the doc, because Mark, you kind of touched on this as well. One thing, you looked at celebrities, entertainers that got jacked up teeth. And when people are like, they got all this money, why don't they go get their teeth fixed? Because it hurt. They scared the dentist just like we all scared the dentist. They're not trying to go. And unless they probably going to get their whole grill totally redone, which you couldn't do up until just recently, last few decades, they like, no, I'm good. So people have the same anxiety of going to the doctors. They grow up, we all know as being part of the Black community, the same distrust for doctors, and for good reason. Got a couple of posts on that. Medical Apartheid is a book you should read if you want to wonder why. So they grew up with that same thing. So we don't know on this long list of the people that died of things that were health related, on whether they could have been prevented. Maybe they could have, maybe they couldn't have. But one thing is for sure, if you're watching this video, you could still do something to prevent yours, perhaps, at least by finding out. When we see, forgot who it was up here with prostate cancer, is a perfect example. And we know that especially Black men, once beyond 40, no one wants to go get the finger wave. Thankfully, there are other ways doctors do it now, but from all the docs I've been told, with Black men, because it's especially dangerous and it could be missed, then we need to maybe have the finger and not just a blood test or not just I think an MRI. So the point is, go this month. The month isn't over yet. Everybody brag about their good job and their good insurance. Let's use that good job and that good insurance to go to doctors, at least for a checkup, if you haven't had one since you played high school ball and you had to get that piece of paper signed. And for many people, that is how it goes. And as we often hear with heart attacks, and that was number one on that list that we looked at, oftentimes the first one is the killer. And that's the first time somebody realizes and finds out they had a heart problem. They had heart disease. That can be prevented. So as we look at this, the one thing, and let me add this as well, y'all said it, the music still lives. For many of us, though, we regular folk. And if you're not the kind of guy that has a journal that you write your thoughts in, your kids won't have that to remember you by. what is it going to be, that legacy that your kids are going to remember you by when you leave? Because if you think, your money, look, by the time you die, your wife probably going to have somebody else up in your bedroom anyway, especially depending on how young and how hot she is. Somebody going to be farting in your comforter. Daddy chair ain't even going to have too long to get cold. And that's just the reality of it. And so what are you going to have that people remember you by, whether it's not even your family, but it's still that legacy? A lot of these guys that we looked at, they at least have the music. And that's what I think what you've heard for the last couple of hours, that enriches all of our lives. And it's even enriched our kids' life because that music formed who we are today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that, any last words, gentlemen? Any plugs you want to give for your social, things like that? Feel free.
No, sir. I appreciate you creating this environment and this opportunity. So it's good stuff, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Because y'all, this is why you got to have smart friends. This is why I want to be the dumbest in the room, and I am with y'all. So thank you. Thank you. Mark, what you got?
Well, as Devin led us where we are now, I would just leave this point talking about health, is that as long as you're thinking about your health, you need to come see your insurance man, because you got two insurance experts sitting on this panel right now. Number one. Number two, just a shout out. I'm a brother who spent a lot of time doing a lot of research on the situation of Black folks in Brazil. Come and check me out on my YouTube channel. It's called blackbraziltoday.com. Well, Black Brazil Today. Just punch that up and you'll find my channel on YouTube.
I'll put it down in the description as well so people can find you. And, feel free, man, use this video for your stuff as well. Whatever you can will fit your Brazilian audience. So
all right.
That's a great point, bro. Y'all got two insurance people and a fitness trainer. Brothers, ain't no excuse. Ain't no excuse.
Well, and part of it to put that plug in is almost too late to the audience we're targeting, but I'm a big proponent of get the life insurance early. No GoFundMe's, no anything else like that. Get it while you're healthy and while you can. So
I've been talking to Devin about that. We talk almost every day, and that's where I'm at. You got to get it while you're young, before your health breaks down and you have to get a higher policy, or you're not going to be able to afford it.
Yep. Well, and the thing of it is too, and not to change into this whole other, and you can maybe Dev should have stopped recording, maybe kept talking, but just that the insurance part in and of itself is something altogether different. And you talk about the history. There's a very checkered history of why their life insurance is.
I know where you're going.
The way it is.
Yeah.
And so, there's some taboos that are there, and some things that have just been done so egregiously wrong in our community that people, I don't want to do that. I'm better putting it in the mattress or whatever. Mm-hmm. The thinking is a better savings plan. And the reality of it is if, when I see these GoFundMe's and I get it, everybody doesn't have the opportunity, but the question is, how much do I need? The real question is, get whatever it is you can afford.
Yeah.
Because some of it, if I look at what some people are trying, if you can, I don't even want to get started on that one. Let me just stop.
You're trying to say, don't say you can't afford insurance and you bouncing an Escalade.
Exactly. Like you can afford something. And
right.
It's like, especially if you have young kids, it's like you got to figure it out. But yeah, so I'll get off that topic for now.
So wait a minute. Can I get y'all brothers to commit to a part 2? Can we get another series on insurance?
Yeah, I'm not a licensed person.
I got a story to tell.
Yeah.
All right.
I got my CLU CHFC designation, so I'm I know insurance. It's just like it's a mood breaker, so it's like I don't go to parties and start that out as my icebreaker or anything like that. But yeah, it is very important.
We need it, and I have to say, a side plug. I have mine, and I got mine when I was young. Compliments for your father. So
wow. There you go.
Your dad.
There you go.
I'm sure because of him. So
all right.
That's love that.
And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I think that probably would have been a good element. We touched a little bit on the money, that
Yep.
these entertainers had or didn't have.
Yep.
We talked about Prince this show. One thing that was the whole big thing is, what did Prince have in line when he passed away? And
Yep.
so,
there was no will.
Yes.
Yep.
So when we start looking at those things, I think that is going to be a segue, y'all. So y'all heard it. We're going to do another show soon when we get the times coordinated. Maybe we can get it done before this month is out. But, we don't have to celebrate Black History, because as a homeschooling dad, Black History wasn't just in February. Black History was 65 all 12. So
that's awesome, man.
We'll always be willing to talk about it. So, brothers, I can't thank y'all enough. The knowledge y'all drop, I learn. I'm smarter. As Lemuel Haynes said, I'm going to go to bed a lot smarter. Thanks to y'all, man. Thanks for the
appreciate it.
Yeah, that's exactly how
always
I'm
a pleasure.
Yeah, we'll set it up again. We got to do it again.
Sounds good. All right. We'll talk, y'all. Take care.
All right, y'all.
Don't hang up yet. Don't hang up yet. Let me just stop recording. But everybody else, like and subscribe to the video before we go.